meet you all again. Cool. Again, thank you to all the sponsors. I think it's really awesome. We've been able to carry this on and still have this session virtual. So thank you to all of them. Really excited to be here with you guys. So today I really just wanted to talk to you guys about fitness with a bleeding disorder. And when me and Eric talked, we wanted to really get past, I think you guys have generally heard about activity, and activity is important and you can be active, and here are some of the good activities, here are some that are more frowned upon, but no one has really gotten into, or not a ton, into the nitty and gritty of here's how to be active and here's how to take that step past, I'm going to go walk around the block. So we really wanted to get down more into the nitty gritty today. This really is supposed to be, that's why we hosted it as a meeting, more of an engaging session. So if throughout the meeting session you have a question, try and drop it in the chat box. I'm going to try and keep my eyes on it. If you have a burning question and I haven't noticed it in the chat box, just feel free to turn your screen on, turn your audio on, shout out at me. But I will try and keep an eye on the chat spot so I can answer any of your questions in the moment, but we'll also have time at the end, hopefully, to answer a few questions that anyone might get through this. So bleeding disorders, the general, any and all bleeding disorders in fitness. I think a lot of us probably remember where general activity was more frowned upon and really discouraged. There was kind of this belief that by exercising, being active, particularly lifting, that there was this high risk of bleed. And since we didn't have as good of ways to manage bleeding, control bleeding, prevent bleeding, it really wasn't seen as a worthy risk to take. So generally activity was kind of discouraged. If you were active, it was very much, okay, you can go walk, but we don't want you playing sports. We don't want you lifting weights. We don't want you doing anything contact, because of that risk of bleeding. And then there was also this idea that, not only just being active could cause bleeding, but we know that part of how your muscles grow is that as you work out, as you lift, there's this micro tearing that occurs. There's a micro tearing, the muscle heals, and that's how we actually have increases in strength and mass. And they were concerned that, okay, this micro tearing is going to cause bleeding, and absolutely we don't want to do something that's purposely causing bleeding. But thankfully, over time, we really found that not only is exercise safe, but really, it's beneficial. Everyone, anyone, particularly those of us with bleeding disorders, can benefit from being active. We have found that micro tearing doesn't actually cause bleeding. We still get that micro tearing just like anyone would, but it's not enough that it's actually causing bleeding within the muscle in most cases. So over the last few years, particularly, we've seen kind of this push towards, okay, we can be active and let's discuss how to be active. And I think one of the biggest resources that came out was the Play It Safe guidelines, and they've had a few iterations and updates of it over the last few years. And it just really lays out, okay, these are the activities, and we have a green, we have a yellow, we have a red. The green being activities like, yes, go for it 100%. And then working their way up to the red activities, which typically were the collision activities, being a maybe not type of thing. Hopefully, go back. That's fine. Hopefully everyone can hear my voice today, or my voice okay. Please let me know if it's too
Just getting
loud.
some slight delays here and there, but nothing too bad yet.
Okay, let me know if it gets worse. Hopefully we are on our Wi-Fi, which generally always tries to work. Living out in the middle of Montana, sometimes it likes to misbehave. But gonna go back to that real quick. So Play It Safe was really kind of, I think, one of the first things that gave us this kind of idea of let's be active, and this is kind of how to be active. One thing I'll say is, as I was transitioning out of the HTC, is that there was kind of this push for some of those more red activities, and children, adults wanting to be active in those red activities. And I think that's where really continuing to have those discussions, and particularly this discussion, is helpful. I remember one of my skills with the Play It Safe is powerlifting is considered a red activity. I am an avid powerlifter. I've competed in powerlifting for quite a few years now. So that's always one of my little own pickles. And I think the biggest thing to take from it is not me trying to push that it's a safe activity, but how can we make some of these activities safe and introduce it safely? So hopefully we'll get to talk about that and give a little clearer idea on some of those throughout this. Like I said, everyone should be exercising. There's so many benefits of exercising. One of the biggest ones I think we can talk about is just building those strong muscles. So we know that generally as having a bleeding disorder, it often affects our joints. And that's what we're really concerned about, is that bleeding into our joints, causing arthritis, and causing those symptoms later in life that really limits us. What we know though, is that if we can have strong muscles around those joints, the activity or the chance of getting an injury actually lowers, because when I misstep, instead of my joint taking all that impact, hopefully my muscles are going to react and be like, oh, nope, we don't want to go that way. Let's get back into a better position. So not only hopefully are we decreasing the chance of injury, but by having less injuries, less bleeding, less chance of developing that arthritis from that bleeding into the joint. And then another really big one that I think has been really important is just general health. I think for a long time, there was kind of this misconception that hemophiliacs can't have heart attacks. They can't have cardiovascular events. We bleed, we don't clot. And unfortunately, well, the risk of heart attacks is generally seen as probably a little less. There is definitely bleeding individuals with bleeding disorders out there who have had heart attacks and strokes and the various cardiovascular events. And, you know, anything we can do to prevent that, we want to be doing. And one of those is being active. So in any way that we can be active, we can really decrease our risk of experiencing one of these cardiovascular events or other diseases that come along with generally being less active. And then another thing that's been studied a little bit is that by being active, can we actually use less factor? And there's kind of two ways that they look at this is A, less injuries. Again, we're protecting our joints. A small misstep is hopefully not causing a bleed because I'm active. My body is prepared for that. The other one is a lot of factor, we dose based off weight. And so hopefully by managing a better weight, we're using less factor in that way as well. So those are kind of the two big, we might be able to save our insurance and by using less factor. And then I think we can never overlook the mental health considerations of being active. Generally, people report that they feel better after being active. It helps our mindset. I'm having a bad day, but then I ran for this run and, you know, I'm feeling a little bit better. And I think there really is a strong component of just being active and being able to kind of find that better mental health or kind of get ourselves set on the right direction. So a lot of this, we're going to talk a little bit about cardiovascular running, and then we're going to kind of go into quite a bit of the lifting, strength training aspect. And so a big question is, okay, I'm working on being active. I want to be more active. I want to go to the gym. Do I need to do a specific pre-activity dose of factor? And of course, the annoying answer is it really depends. Questions I really encourage patients to think about is, what is this activity that I'm doing? Is this normal for my body? So, you know, I enjoy walking. I go walking 4 times a week. I go the same distance every time I walk. Your body's used to that activity. It is within your normal activity. So likely what you normally do is going to be enough. Now, let's say I haven't been to the gym in 3 months. I'm going to go to the gym for the first time and I plan on lifting weights. It's a big extreme from what your body has been doing previously, and quite potentially a big extreme. And that's when we want to start considering, okay, our body hasn't prepared for this. We might need to consider, do I need something extra? Because really our goal is to prevent the bleeding. You know, we want to have a good plan for if we have a bleed. But if we can do something to prevent, hopefully in the long term by building better muscle, but if we're new to this, there might need to be a little bit more support around that and getting started. So I really like to think about, where am I physically? What is my normal? And where does this activity fall within that? Is it just slightly more aggressive than I'm used to, slightly more intense, or is this is a really big new activity? Or I've been lifting a little bit, but today I plan to really increase the intensity. So if it's above that regular activity for you, you might need to consider some pre-activity factor. And the biggest thing is always talking to your HTC, talking to your hematologist about what makes the most sense for you, because there is no black and white. It really depends on, your history of bleeding, your factor, which one you're on. So having that discussion before you get started can be really helpful. And so leading into that, a lot of people, then the question is, okay, what about Hemlibra? It really is supposed to be giving us better protection. Do I need additional factor if I'm on Hemlibra? So really likely what we had seen is most often it's going to prevent bleeding, especially going back to, where does this fall within my realm of activity? Is this, again, kind of within my normal activity? It's not a big stretch. I've been doing this for a while, or I've been slowly progressing. There's a good chance that Hemlibra is going to give you really good coverage, and you're not going to need a extra dose on top of that. Of course, there's always exceptions. Like I said, starting a new program, especially if, let's say, knees have been your target joint and now you plan on starting to running. Running in general tends to be stressful on a lot of individuals' knees, not just those of bleeding disorders. So, I have bad knees. My knees are my target joints. You might need to consider doing a little extra, really being mindful about how you are increasing your activity. And then another big one with Hemlibra, even if you have been preparing your body, you've been lifting for a while, maxing out strenuous exercise. We're going to talk a little bit about maxing out in just a second. Anything that really pushes your body kind of to that, maximal point, your max end range, then you might need to consider, even if you are a very active person, something on top of it. Again, these always should be discussed specifically with your hematologist, because they're going to know you best and have that best recommendation for you. So something I always like to discuss with patients as they're getting started is, how do I know I'm just sore? And when do I need to be concerned that this is a bleed? And so I always like to think about, okay, I really worked out my arms today and holy bananas, my arm hurts. Okay, gently, I want you to see, can you take that arm through full range of motion? If so, like, it's achy, but yeah, I can move it. More than likely, that's just soreness. You started a new activity, you did a little bit more than your body's used to. If you can still move it through that full range of motion, more likely than not, it's just that soreness. But it's those hallmarks of bleeding. Okay, nope, I'm a little stuck, or yeah, I can almost move it through, but goodness, my elbow is super puffy. If it quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, we got to be concerned that it's a duck. So yeah, if you're seeing swelling, if you're seeing it's warmth, then that's when we do need to be concerned it's a bleed, and more than just soreness. But really looking at, how are you moving? Can I move it through full range of motion? Can typically give us a good idea of, no, it's probably still just soreness. We want to keep an eye on it, make sure that it's not lasting an unreasonable amount of time. But we can hopefully feel confident and not need to, start treating as if a bleed. So one question I really liked to go over quite a bit with, especially, some of my athletes, particularly high school athletes, is, can I max out? So I'm in the gym, I'm squatting, I'm benching, whatever the lift may be, cleaning, and taking it to that all out maximal effort to the point of failure. And so my biggest thing I always like to have everyone think of is, what are your goals? And I found this really important with someone like a high school student. They're practicing or in the weight room for soccer. It's part of their team as they go to the weight room. Everyone lifts, and there's this goal of, okay, we lift for 6 weeks, and then everyone maxes out their squat to see what it's at. As a soccer player, how important is that max squat to you being a successful soccer player? In that case, I would argue their agility, the coordination, and general strength is a lot more important than that max squat. And the reason I really like to have that question and pose that question is by pushing your body to that failure point, to your all-out max, there's an inherent risk of injury. There's an inherent risk of injury in me when I do it. And so then we know that inherent risk of injury is going to be compounded in someone with a bleeding disorder. There's the chance when we go to failure that we actually fail. Your knee gives out, your muscle gives out, or it is just a lot of stress on that muscle. And so maybe it doesn't collapse, it doesn't give out, but we have taken it to the point where it could not do anymore. And there's a risk of injury, there's a risk of strain. And so we know, okay, I strained my hamstring deadlifting, it's going to be really sore and it's going to hurt to walk. That strain has an actual mechanism of injury, those muscles tearing more so than just those micro tears. And someone with the bleeding disorder is going to 99% of the time be actively with that. So it really needs to be, is that risk of injury worth it for my activity? So if you're doing it as part of a team, you're doing it, my goal is to be a better soccer player, a better football player. I want to run Spartan races better. Most likely that maximal effort lift doesn't really translate to you being better in your activity. So by all means, I strongly encourage people. Lifting is my passion. I love to get people into lifting, but that doesn't mean you need to be maxing out. Sorry. But all that said and done, there's times when maxing out makes sense. Maybe you've gone through that question and maybe it doesn't 100% align with your goals. Maybe it does. Maybe your goal is to lift as much weight as possible. Maybe you are a CrossFitter, a power lifter, Olympic weightlifter, and the goal truly is to lift as much weight as possible, or you just really want to. That is times where we really need to think about how best to prepare ourselves. So if you are maxing out, that is a time when likely you're going to want to consider having something on board, because that risk of injury is much higher. Even if you don't go to failure point, you're putting a lot of stress on that joint, that muscle. And then the other thing I really encourage is what I call a form failure max. And so a true max is, I could not lift any more weight. I tried to squat that weight and I failed. I couldn't get back up. Form failure is, I went to the point where I could keep good form. If I had added 5 more pounds, my form was going to suffer. And this goes for all lifts, all things in the gym. You could even do it with machines. I'm doing leg extension, my leg press. Go to that point of, I can keep really good form. And once I know, okay, that was great, but if I add any more weight, it's going to give. Make that your max, because that truly functionally tells us, okay, how much I can lift, because after this point, I'm just compensating. And does that risk of injury make sense? So thinking about your goals, being okay with having something on board if you are going to that true max, or considering maybe I'm doing a 3-rep max or just slightly below it. So this is really the nitty gritty of what I wanted to talk to you guys about today. Is, I think a lot of us in the pandemic, it's been hard. We haven't had access to gyms, or maybe, it's been a lot. So maybe activity hasn't been as much, or really hope maybe it has nothing to do with the pandemic and you just want to be more active. Is really talking about like how you can become more active and how we get you there. And so the biggest thing is, to be successful, we want to have a plan. I think a lot of us, myself included, like, all right, I'm going to get better. I'm going to run a 10K. I'm going to start running today. And then we get out and run and we're like, oh, that was terrible. I don't want to ever do that again. Having a plan prevents that, and it also prevents that injury component. So part of a plan needs to be, how do I come from step A and how am I going to get to step D, or whatever level it is? Knowing that progression and knowing when I need to stay where I am and when it's okay to go to that next level. It is always going to be better to start slow. I would much rather take 10 weeks to put weight on my squat than, okay, I did great for 4 weeks and then I got injured and I had to go back to square zero. So having a really methodical, this is how I'm going to go from step to step to step. And here is how I know when to go back. So this is my approach. So for this, when I'm talking about soreness, I'm not necessarily specifically talking about like muscle soreness. This is more, I have bad knees. How do I know when achiness in my knees is okay? And how do I know when, okay, that achiness was too much, I need to take a step back. And so this also doesn't include if it actually turned into a bleed, like it's hot, it's swollen, I can't move it. That was too much. We're just going to put that on the table. If we caused a bleed, whatever we did was too much. This is more, I ran for a run, my knee's a little achy. How do I know if it was okay? So my typical approach is 24 hours. It can be semi-achy for 24 hours, but then it should be back to its baseline. Not, oh, it's a little bit better, but it took 5 days to get back, that kind of 24 hours. So if, you went for a run, it was achy for an hour and then it felt good, great. Now we know we can go to the next level next time. If it was achy, kind of stayed that way for a few hours, kind of half a day, I want you to stay at that activity level. What you did was probably okay. We didn't cause a bleed, it made us achy. Didn't make us significantly achy, we can repeat that level. And then if it exceeds that 24 hours, we're doing too much, we're probably putting ourselves at risk for a bleed. And even if we're not putting ourselves at risk for a bleed, we're at risk of exacerbating something that is previously injured on us. And if we kind of continue to push through that, most likely not going to get benefit and increase that risk of injury. I don't necessarily specifically touch on stretching, but I will make sure to come back to your question, Patrick, at the end of this to make sure it gets answered. Thank you for asking. So that's kind of my approach. There's different ways to approach, it really does come down to you, but I think setting that point in the beginning, so that way you can be honest with yourself of knowing when you can't go forward and when it's okay to. And typically, kind of keeping it around that. We don't want your knee, ankle, hip, whatever to be sore for 5 days after you do activity. So first I wanted to talk a little bit about running. And so this is talking about running, but really this is any cardiovascular activity. This could be swimming. This could be riding a recumbent bike. This could be walking around the block. This is how we take that. I told you to have a methodical approach. What does that methodical approach look like? So this is my methodical approach. So it's starting slow and adding a little bit of intensity and then gradually building that. So that looks like I'm going to walk for 4 minutes. I'll run for 1. And right now my goal is 20 minutes. So I'm going to repeat that 4 times. Walk for 4, run for 1. Okay, I did that twice. Nothing. My knees feel great. My ankles feel great. Cool. Next time I'm going to walk for 3, run for 2. Walk for 3, run for 2. Again, assessing my joints, assessing how I feel, assessing my muscles. Feel great. Slowly progressing that. Let's say, okay, I walk for 2, run for 3, and whew, my ankle's a little sore. And it was sore about half a day. Okay, I don't go up from there. I'm going to stay at my walk for 2, run for 3 until I can get to that point. I've trained my body that I feel good. Nothing aches. I am not setting myself up for an injury. Just slowly having that methodical approach. So you're gradually taking and decreasing the kind of less intense part and increasing the more intense part. So for biking, this could be, okay, I'm going at a comfortable speed for me. Honestly, don't bike, so I don't know speeds. But let's say I'm biking at 2 miles per hour, but then for 1 minute, I'm going to really push myself and go for 4 miles per hour. And then I'm going to back down. Same thing with swimming. I'm just casually swimming, and now I'm going to swim harder. Or maybe I'm going to change my stroke to something that's more intense for me. But doing something that's a little easier, followed by a short burst of more intense. And again, having that plan of when is it okay to go up and when do I need to stay there. So that generally is how I approach most cardiovascular, is really having that gradual approach. So that's kind of all I talk about cardiovascular. Feel free to jump out and ask any questions if you have it. We're going to talk a little bit more about the strength training and lifting now. Let's say I want to run a 5K, I want to run a half. I just like cardio. I'm not really interested in lifting. I do always strongly recommend cross training. So cross training is really that adding a strengthening component to your cardiovascular. So maybe your goal is running a 5K. So the meat of your training program is running. There is a lot of benefit to adding into a day or two of strength training. Cardiovascular activities, running in particular, tends to be a very repetitive motion. It's really easy to build compensations. It's really easy to get overuse injuries. Those overuse injuries are just going to be exacerbated, unfortunately, in someone with a bleeding disorder. So ways that we can prevent that is by strengthening the parts that aren't getting addressed when we're running. Strengthening our hips, because they do take a lot of brunt when we're running. So really that adding that strengthening component can prevent injury. It also addresses more of the full body. Biking, it ends up being a lot of legs. Running, it's a lot of legs. Swimming is full body, but it's non-weight bearing. So you don't get the benefits of lifting for your musculoskeletal and bony system. So just really capturing both those benefits from doing a cross training is something I really encourage. And so using some of the things we're going to talk about next can be really helpful if you are, mostly a cardiovascular runner, whatever your activity is. Big thing when lifting and strength training, we talked a little bit about this when I talked about maxing out, is strength training really needs to fit you and fit your goals. If you go on Google, you can find 500 different strength training programs. The one that's going to be best for you is going to be the one that addresses your goals. Everyone has different goals. My own personal goals have changed over the last 5 years. I've done powerlifting, I've done bodybuilding, I've just done general activity, and each of those programs looks different. I put it towards my goal. But overall, when you are looking for a program, the best approach is going to hit your upper body and your lower body. Again, we want to address all of our muscles. All of those muscles are going to help prevent injury. We're going to get the most benefit from addressing both our upper body and lower body. It looks more natural to have an even upper body and lower body. Just really finding something that addresses both the upper and lower, and there's a lot of ways to do that, and you'll see that if you kind of explore through programs. You can do the whole body every day, you can do upper body one day, then lower body, you can do what's called a push-pull, and that's where really, again, doing what fits your goals and fits your lifestyle. Pick a program that I enjoy training my whole body every day. Great, this is a program that would work for you. Or after I work out my legs, I really don't want to work out them again tomorrow. So I'm going to do upper, lower. But the biggest thing is find that program and then recognizing the importance of rest. Too much of a good thing is too much of a good thing. Training every day, lifting every day. This also goes for running every day. Our body cannot function optimally when we are stressing it every single day. I talked a little bit about strength training causes those micro tears. For getting those micro tears, the way we recover and the way we build strength is by allowing that recovery, by allowing that rest. We can't optimally recover if we're repeating and stressing those muscles again the next day. So we really, if we want the maximal benefits of all this work that we're putting in, is we need to have those off days where our body can recover, we can build that strength. And then also, when we stress our body every single day, the risk of overtraining, that injury just increases. And again, a lot of times with injury comes a bleed, unfortunately. So if we can be conscious of our body, respect our body, give it that rest, not only are we going to get the most benefit, but hopefully we're also preventing a bleed, which could, again, take away from everything that we're working towards. I really wanted to give you guys something tangible. I think we talk a lot about, okay, this is how you do it, go out and figure it out. I wanted to give you guys something tangible of this is what it might look like. But I did want to put this caveat out there. These are just example programs. In my ideal world, each of you would find a program that fits you, fits your goals, fits, your joints, your target joints, previous experience. So please, please, please take all of these with a grain of salt. Let's say you do want to try one of them. Please be mindful of adapting it towards you. Don't think that this is the holy grail of program and you have to do it to a T. So we're going to just go through kind of what are different programs. How can I really want to start working on getting stronger? I want to lift weights. I want to do strength training. What does that look like? So one of the most common approaches is what's called a circuit program. So typically what you're doing is you're alternating a lower, upper. Reason being, okay, I worked out my legs. Now I'm allowing my legs to rest as I work out my upper. Okay, now I'm going to go back to a lower. And so we're really able to maximize the amount of work we're doing and the amount of strength training we're doing in a smaller amount of time. A lot of times you'll see kind of like a circuit in a gym, and it'll be machine based where you just go one machine to another and kind of work your way through. The benefit is the really easy way to start strength training. We hit the full body usually, and it tends to be, like I said, it's a great way to start. It's easily accessible to everyone. One of the downsides is it can be because we're doing so much. If your goal is, I want to get as strong as possible, I want to build as much mass as possible, this might not be the best program for you, but it is a really great way to, I just want to generally be stronger. I want to not tweak my knee when I misstep off a step, or I am a runner, but I want to get a little stronger. Starting something like a circuit program can be a really great way to get started. So the one I provided for you guys is, I think one of the hardest things can be strength training at home. So this gave you a good idea of how to add, how to do a circuit program at home using mostly body weight or everyone's favorite, very light weights. I think everyone kind of gets annoyed of hearing about your soup cans and your water jugs, but if that is just trying to start it at home, this is a good way to use body weight and then add that weight on. Great if you have dumbbells, if not, using tangible items around your home to start something like this. And so next would be more of a kind of intro, like I'm getting into lifting, more of a standard program. I do want to build my strength. I do want to build muscle mass. This is a program I would generally write for someone who had that as their goals. But again, this is just one of many, many goals. Things you're going to see in this program is we're looking at compound movements. A compound movement means it hits multiple parts of your body at once. So when you do a squat, whether it's with a barbell, a dumbbell, holding a weight here, you're really targeting your core, your hips, your knees, your ankles. You're getting a lot of bang for your buck. And then we pair it with some easier items after that. I think the biggest things you can kind of take away from here is start with that big movement, work to easier. The other part is don't worry about doing 55 exercises all in your one session. So if you kind of compare that circuit training, there was, I think, like 7 exercises for that one session. Here, I have 4. Reason being is we're putting a lot more effort into those specific exercises. I'm doing them for more reps. I'm going to need more rest in between to recover. This is really looking at, I'm starting to build more strength. This mixes that upper and lower each day. That's approach I personally really like, is I'm going to work my legs in a really good compound movement, and then I'm going to finish off with some upper body. Okay, or I really worked my upper body and bench today. Maybe I'll do some lighter upper body, or I'll even finish with some lighter leg exercises. But this is one of the ways I really like to kind of get started, get it introduced. But the biggest, most important part of this is there's so many approaches, you want to find the one that fits you, and you want to adapt things towards you. There's a lot of compound movements in here, which I love, but it's also realistic that might not work for you, or it might not work for you and how I have it written based on your previous health joint. And we'll go over some compensations kind of here at the end, but really being mindful of being okay with taking something like this and adapting it to you. So what percentage of time is best to do cardio versus circuit training when slowly progressing back into a workout routine? So a couple, I'll quickly answer that and then we'll continue on, it depends. Everyone hates this answer. What are you doing currently? So let's say, currently I'm doing no strength training and I run twice a week. I'm fine with you keeping that twice a week, adding one day, see how you feel, see how your body recovers. I think optimally, if you're doing cardio and circuit training, at least 2 days a week strength training, and then anywhere from 2 to 3 days cardio. I typically find that I like to not exceed 5 days a week training, whether it's cardio strength training, because that really gives your body the amount of time to rest. I personally only work out 4 days a week with outside activity on top of that. But looking at your whole, you need to break it into, I need to make sure I'm getting rest. What am I doing? What's my goal? I think if you can get 2 days of strength training, that's fantastic. And then adding whatever amount of cardio makes sense, whether it's 3 days, 4 days, depending on what you're doing as well, how intense. So the last I wanted to talk about, as I alluded to, I am a competitive powerlifting. I love working under a barbell. And one of my favorite things has been able to see patients with bleeding disorders get into the gym and be able to lift heavier weights and, pursue some of these, what we call compound, the big lifts, the squat, the bench, the deadlift. So this is one of the ways that I introduce it. Again, you're going to notice there's not a ton of exercises. When we really start to work heavier, we start to work these bigger movements. It's important that we're not doing too much so your body can rest, and really focusing on form. When we start working under a barbell, form is so important to helping to prevent injury. It's also making sure that form fits you. So if this is something you're interested in, it's something you wanted to pursue, my best piece of advice is I really encourage, I know this isn't applicable for everyone, it's not always possible, have a coach if you can. Have someone that can watch you and make sure you're moving optimally. If that's not reasonable, having someone there with you, have someone, to be honest, that, hey, I'm watching you do that, and you're really loading your right leg and your left leg isn't doing much. It is amazing when you're moving, and this actually goes for all programs, how much we can't feel. I have been known, I actually tore my right knee meniscus because I was shifting over onto my right knee when I was squatting and couldn't even tell until unfortunately I overdid it and ended up tearing my meniscus doing that. But specifically the barbell, we really, really want to take it slow. You want to make sure you're training your body, preparing it, getting it ready for that extra load. I'm going to quickly move through because I have talked way too much and I want to make sure I at least have a few minutes for questions at the end. But this is a great way. I just wanted to give you an example. And then modify. There is 100 programs out there. There's 100 exercises. There's also 100 ways to make that exercise fit you. So these are some of the big ones you're going to find in a strength training program. These are ways you can modify it based on, I have a target elbow, I have a previous target knee, my ankle just aches. It wasn't a target joint, but it aches. These are some ways that you can compensate, you can modify. And there's also a billion more ways that you can modify. So, but this kind of gave you an idea of, okay, I'm looking into programs, I see this, I don't think I can do that. Here's what I can do. And that's what I really want to encourage you. Find what you can do, because there's so many ways to be active. There's so many ways to strength train, no matter what our previous health injury is. And just some quick resources to get started. I think, one of the biggest things you can do is have a conversation with your hematologist. A lot of times, hopefully you also have access to a physical therapist. They can be a great resource and, okay, this is what I want to do. Help me figure out how I can do it, because I don't want to aggravate my knee. I don't want to aggravate my elbow, but it's really important to me. And I'm really excited to get started on this. HFA Helping Hands is fantastic for protective gear. Let's say, one of the things we've really found beneficial is they make an elbow brace that prevents you from hyperextending. Or you can also lock it down so it doesn't go past, it's only going to let you go to that point that's comfortable. It's not going to let you go and hang on that joint and cause a bleed. And then a lot of local chapters are great at helping to fund gym membership if that is an issue for you or a barrier for you. So sorry, a little bit rushed at the end. I wanted to make sure we had enough time for questions. First, I want to just go back to Patrick. So he asked, is stretching important? And I definitely want to make it sure that it's something that shouldn't be overlooked. I think there's a lot of ways to stretch. More than important than stretching, I really want to emphasize warming up. So I think a lot of times in grade school, we were taught stretching as warming up. And warming up should really be more so, I'm warming up my body and preparing for my movement of the day. And it might include what's called dynamic stretching. So I'm actively moving through that motion. I'm not necessarily holding and pausing. The typical stretching where, okay, I'm reaching for my toes, I'm trying to lengthen my hamstrings, can be really helpful if that's an area that's limited for you. At the end of your workouts, you want to do that static stretching after you're already warm. So it should be, I warm up, I lift or do my cardio, and then I static stretch if that's an area that I've identified that is necessary for me. I think a lot of us can benefit from stretching. I won't say it's, you have to stretch to be successful, because sometimes actually stretching and just hanging on a joint could cause issues. So I won't say like, oh, if you don't stretch your hamstrings, you're not going to prevent injury. Really making it fit towards you. And so good question, follow up for that, Steve. Shouldn't one avoid ballistic stretching? So ballistic is where you really are kind of like aggressively moving through that range of motion. So there's a difference between dynamic and ballistic. A dynamic stretching is a very controlled through that motion. So one of my favorites is what they're called leg swings. And it's just, I'm taking my leg controllably through its range of motion. I'm not swinging it and flinging it at the end range of motion. That ballistic stretching tends to not have as much benefit and has a bigger risk of injury. So I would agree, avoiding that ballistic and really more of that dynamic stretching. Patrick, how do I improve my flexibility? I'm pretty stiff in my knees. And that really kind of depends on why are you stiff? Is it a joint limitation? Is it a muscle limitation? I will say, no matter which it is, low load, long duration is the best way to increase your flexibility or your mobility. And so what I mean by that is, let's say I'm going to do a hamstring stretch. Going to that point where you have mild discomfort, but I can hold it actually for like 10 to 15 minutes is going to give you the most long-term carryover. So it shouldn't be a strong discomfort, because you should be able to hold it for 5 minutes before you're like, okay, I got to get out of that position. And it might be something, it absolutely is something you're going to have to work up to. Light discomfort, okay, today I could hold it for 3 minutes. Next time, maybe I can hold it for 3.5. Then I'm going to 5. The same thing goes with if you do have joint limitations, you want to go to that point of slight discomfort and just hang out there. You're not cranking on it. You're not pushing it to that point where I have tears in my eyes. If it is a true joint limitation, I do think it's always helpful to have someone assess your joint before you do start, just because, you know, I can generally tell you this is how you increase range of motion, but everyone's joint's different. The joint surface is different. Why your joint is limited is different. So having that conversation with the hematologist or your physical therapist is really important. But really it's that low load, long duration that has the most carryover for actually gaining improvements in flexibility. Anyone else? Questions, thoughts? Feel free to jump out. Yoga is fantastic. I will tell you, I suck at yoga. It is most likely because I have spent so much time strength training, and it is something I need because I really suck at it. Yoga is really beneficial for that stretching, that gaining mobility, and being able to move well through your range of motion, which I think is something that's overlooked. It's not only having the flexibility, it's being able to move through it and being able to control it. So absolutely love yoga. The one thing with yoga is I kind of consider it more, it's not cardio, but I think there's a strong benefit if you are someone who loves yoga, adding strength training to it. Because it's a lot of dynamic stretching, holding at end ranges. It's great for control, but I think you don't get as much of that true strengthening. And that combination of I'm gaining flexibility and now I'm also strengthening can make you just overall a healthier, better moving human being. And I could definitely use more yoga in my life. Is running on grass better than concrete in regards to impact on your body? Absolutely, yes. With the caveat of being mindful of the grass that you're running on. I would actually say something like a pliable surface trail, a track is going to be your number one. That's not available to everyone, obviously. The only caveat with grass is going to be hidden holes, lumps, things you could trip over. But concrete is a very, very hard surface. It's not super forgiving. If you are someone who has issues with joints, it can be more uncomfortable. Let's say concrete is all you have, working your way up with it. Starting out, I'm going to walk for quite a bit, and then I'm just going to run. And it might only be actually 30 seconds, not that whole minute. And just slowly increasing your tolerance. There is nothing to say that running on concrete is going to injure you. It just definitely is higher impact than something like grass. Kind of running over, so if anyone has one last burning question, let me know. I did put my email on here. I love the hemophilia community, the bleeding disorder community. I was sad to step away from the HCC, but I really do want to stay involved, and I love staying involved. So, and I also am passionate about strength training and fitness and being healthy. So if you do have questions, that is my personal email. You can always email me, especially if it's something specific to you, like, hey, this wasn't really applicable to your session, but I have a question about my knee. Feel free to email me.
I also want to make one note that when we post this recording, we'll post it to YouTube. And for the programs that Rachel provided, it's relatively easy to screenshot those programs and then go ahead and look up those exercises you're not familiar with. There's lots of video tutorials online that should show you how to do those exercises. So Rachel provided what I think is a really great, and I will be screenshotting those programs. Really great resources to help you get started in a concrete way. So we are definitely near the end of the time here. So thank you so much for your time and your expertise. So thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. It really was a pleasure. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
And what we'll do now is I'll ask that those of you who want to stay on for the Blood Brotherhood chat, please go ahead and stay. So that'll be closed to members of the community who have a bleeding disorder or above the age of 18 and identify as male. So for those of you who don't fall into those categories, thank you so much for your time, And see you Saturday tomorrow for kids programming and teen programming, and then Monday for everyone else. So thank you all for joining.